Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're plunging into a source that is, well, frankly, it's just breathtaking in its demands.
It really is.
We are unpacking a 1977 speech by Sun Myung Moon delivered in New York. And the theme is so provocative. The title alone says it all. God depends on us alone.
It's an extraordinary claim, right? Because
Right.
it completely inverts the usual relationship between, a creator and the people who are created.
Exactly.
And our mission for this deep dive is to go beyond just that headline. We need to really analyze the demands he placed on his followers, understand his absolute rejection of what he saw as the failures of other religions, and really get to why this group believed they were the only agents who could finally fulfill God's will.
That's a critical distinction. This isn't just about people helping God.
Not at all.
The source is saying the entire cosmic plan, the whole thing, requires human cooperation, that God literally cannot do it by himself.
Precisely. The core idea here is that if Adam and Eve had succeeded, this gigantic scheme of oneness, as he calls it, would have been fulfilled instantly.
But they didn't.
They didn't. Their failure, the fall, created this rupture. And because God works through human beings, and those first partners failed, God himself became stalled. He couldn't complete his original plan. And the next 6,000 years of history, that's all defined by that initial tragedy.
Okay, so before we get into the mess of the present day, let's look at that ideal. What did that original plan actually look like?
It was a vision of absolute unity, spanning everything.
Heaven and earth.
Heaven and earth. The perfection of Adam and Eve was meant to be the foundation. Their perfected love would create perfected families, and those families would just fill the universe. And critically, this would create total unity between our physical world and the spirit world.
And if that had happened, what would daily life have looked like? I mean, what are the practical consequences of a world without a fall?
The change would have been
That-
total. First, no earthly hell.
Yeah.
Suffering, evil. Just impossible.
Wow.
And when you finished your physical life, you would have gone automatically into heaven. No judgment, no test. Just a natural transition.
Automatic entry into heaven. That's a powerful idea.
It is. And it goes beyond just the individual. The entire culture created by this perfected Adam and Eve would have automatically become God's culture.
So God would be everywhere.
Exactly. He'd dwell inside each person's heart. That's the internal perfection, but also in the unified global society that they created. The external perfection.
So internal and external.
That's the definition he gives for the kingdom of heaven on earth. A perfected spirit and a perfected world together.
Which makes the contrast with our current reality just so jarring.
Utterly contradictory. I mean, the source describes the world as this collection of separate, conflicting cultures and nations. He says this small planet is literally divided up by boundaries which prevent people from traveling freely.
It's the exact opposite of unity.
It's proof, from his perspective, that God's will remains completely unfulfilled.
So if the problem is separation, you'd think the solution would be religion. I mean, didn't God establish religions to fix this?
Well, that's where the speech gets really sharp. He delivers this scathing critique, arguing that even the greatest religious founders, they just misunderstood their core purpose.
How so?
They focused too narrowly, they got stuck inside their own theology, their own doctrine, and they missed the bigger picture.
God's global goal of unity.
Exactly. They were meant to solve division, but often they just ended up creating more of it by emphasizing their own local truth over a universal one.
And what were the sort of observable failures that came from that?
A critical failure of focus. He laments that so many religious people were and are concerned almost exclusively with individual salvation.
Just saving themselves.
Right. But the source argues that the life of faith has to transcend the individual, even transcend the nation, and reach for what he called world salvation. If you're only saving yourself or your country, you're not fixing God's original problem.
And he gives a really potent example of this.
Oh, yeah. He points directly at Christianity. Jesus came, 2,000 years ago to bring one religion. But by 1977, Christianity had split into...
More than 400 denominations.
400, he calls it petty, contradictory.
Yeah.
He asks, if Christ came back, how could he possibly face God with 400 different groups, all claiming they're the only right one? It's a powerful way of saying that division, no matter how sincere, is failure.
So if all those past methods failed, what is the new requirement? What kind of religion is God looking for now?
He's looking for something that doesn't just tolerate other truths, but can naturally assimilate them. Something that stimulates spiritual maturity across all of mankind.
And not through force.
Right. That's crucial. It can't be antagonistic. He says it must be compatible with the truth in them all and thus link them all together. It has to be this This heavenly ideology is so universal that it just unites everyone naturally.
Which brings us to his movement, the Unification Church, which is presented as the agent to do this. And to achieve that, the members had to adopt a lifestyle that was, well, radical.
The requirements were extreme. Absolute transcendence of all racial boundaries, all national loyalties. The goal was to prove, practically, that humanity could be united under one God and one new Christ figure.
And to do that, they had to shed everything that defined them.
Everything. The source gives these striking details about their lives in 77. He describes them as being like gypsies.
Tell us about that physical sacrifice.
It was total. They had no possessions. He uses this one analogy that's just, it's incredibly moving.
Is it the one about the snail?
That's the one. He says, a snail has its tiny shell as a house, but you don't even have a shell.
Wow.
It just paints this picture of complete sacrifice. They were doing jobs, society shunned fundraising, selling papers, all while believing this humbling labor was literally saving the world.
And that kind of commitment, it must have come at a huge cost, especially with family.
A tremendous cost. The source talks about parents disowning their own children or even kidnapping them for deprogramming.
Unparalleled, he called it.
Yeah. He asserted that this intensity of persecution coming from the family itself was historic. And it was, in a strange way, proof of the movement's radical power to inspire that kind of devotion.
And that devotion is sustained by some foundational ideas. You mentioned earlier that God trusts the ideals learned from the true parents. Can you just break that down for us?
Sure. The true parents refers to Sun Myung Moon and his wife, Hak Jahan Moon. In this theology, they are seen as the successful Adam and Eve, the ones who finally fulfilled the covenant that the first parents broke.
Okay, so they are the source of the new perfected ideals.
Exactly. The blueprint for the true family that will build the kingdom of heaven. Following their teachings is how you adopt those ideals.
And this leads to this unique identity transformation, the Mooney becoming a Sunny. Let's get into that.
Right, so the term Mooney, which came from his name, actually had positive meanings inside the movement. One was a multicolored fabric design, like they were weaving beauty back into the world.
But the destiny is the key part.
That's the key. They're called Moonies now, reflecting the sort of changing moon-like struggle on Earth. But the source says when they win, they will occupy God's throne and become Sunnies.
Reflecting the unchanging central position of the sun.
Exactly. But you only get there through absolute commitment. A commitment so total you'd have to give up supreme political power.
That's the ultimate test.
Absolutely. He asks them, if you became president of a nation, would you be willing to resign immediately just to eliminate national boundaries? And the message is clear. If you hesitate, you're not qualified to be a citizen of the kingdom of heaven.
That level of demand brings us to this core crisis of trust you mentioned. Why does the source say that God trusts man's thinking but not man's actions, even for these followers?
This is such a radical part of the ideology. God is willing to trust the ideals learned from the true parents. He trusts the blueprint. But after 6,000 years of failure, starting with Adam and Eve, you can't just trust words or beliefs anymore.
The failure has always been in the execution.
Always. So the mandate is about physical, measurable output. The concept has to become a deed, instantly. The rule is, your word and deed must become one.
Which is why the movement generated so much controversy.
Exactly. They weren't just talking about unity, they were doing things, taking visible, often disruptive action. It shifted the whole game away from just belief to, labor and results.
And the ultimate example of this was the Yankee Stadium crusade.
That was the crucible. A huge storm hit the rally. The weather was awful. He even claims that enemies hired assassins, but the rain thwarted their plans.
So common sense would say, cancel it.
Of course. But the source stresses only Moonies would continue under such adverse conditions. That unyielding action, that sheer physical commitment, that's what proved their spiritual worth and led directly to the successful Washington Monument rally a few months later. That was seen as the cornerstone.
What's so interesting is how opposition itself is used as a tool for growth. Persecution isn't a setback.
No, it's advancement. It's actually internalized. He goes so far as to say that if there's no external persecution, he will persecute the members himself.
To test them.
To test them, to force them to bear more fruit. It creates this environment of total resilience. The idea is that the attackers will get tired, but the followers have to be like rubber, always bouncing back. That's how they win, even when it looks like they're losing.
And that resilience leads to the final step for the individual follower. They have to take initiative.
Right. They have to stop just following instructions. They need to graduate from being a servant to being a partner. They have to anticipate what needs to be done.
He gives an example, right?
He does. He talks about preparing to march ahead to what he called Satan's city of Moscow without being told. It's that aggressive ownership, that initiative, that finally makes God trust them. It turns them into a true leader. So to bring this all back to where we started, this 1977 speech basically places the fate of the entire cosmos on the individual members' shoulders.
God depends on each person, alone.
Exactly. The heavenly kingdom isn't some promise you wait for. It's their kingdom, but only if they build it with their own hands. After 6 millennia of failure, he presents these followers as the only people God may possibly trust.
It just fundamentally reframes the value of human effort, and that's the powerful idea we want to leave you with. The speaker said that any offering, even a small amount of money or a humble job, has infinite value if it's connected to the heavenly heart, because it's tied to the salvation of all mankind. So think about that. If you genuinely connect your most difficult, tedious, daily labor, scrubbing a floor, working a thankless job, to the highest imaginable purpose, how does that conviction transform the value of that task? It redefines hard work as infinitely worthy action.